This is a demo on how to use chalk pastels for a drawing. What I've done is on my piece of paper here, I put my pastels in value order from lightest to darkest. I have a kneaded eraser, a regular vinyl eraser, and a X-Acto knife. I also might want to use a blending stump. My blending stump's a little bit dirty, but you can clean that. There'll be a demo on how to do that as well. Here I have my drawing all blocked in with the outlines drawn to the correct vanishing points. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to take a look at my example that I have taken a picture of the hallway, and I'm going to kind of analyze where the lights and darks are in that hallway. What I also would suggest doing is starting from the middle of the drawing and working your way out towards the edges, because it'll actually be a little bit easier for you and it'll be cleaner. You won't get as much on your clothing or your arms or the side of your hand if you do that. Technically, I'm going to start just with this little bit of light. I can see that there's light coming in from the side of the hallway that's back here on the side. And I'm actually using the entire side of the pastel. I can also take my finger and rub to make it very, very smooth. In addition to using that whole side, I can actually use a corner of the pastel to get a very, very thin line. I can use the side that I compare to an eraser to get a thicker type line. And of course I can use the entire side of the pastel in order to cover a large area rather quickly. I'm actually going around the display case that's at the end of the hallway as well, because that's actually going to be a little bit darker value in a little bit. As I'm working on my drawing, you can tell that I'm not freaking out if I go over the lines a little bit. Right now I'm just kind of blocking in this white on this entire back wall because I want the light to show up over there. And technically, this right side is going to be a little bit darker, but I have to actually fill it with the entire white first. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my next lightest color, which is this like pinkish purple, and I'm going to add that to the wall as well. And what I would suggest is that you don't, if you look, I kind of went from thin to thick over here. Part of the reason that I did that is I actually have to think about how the value is shifting from light to dark across that page. So I'm going to add a little bit of this pinkish, it's actually more pink than purple, on this entire wall. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to even add purple into it because I tend to like those colors. So I'm going to put this medium tone down now, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my purple and I'm going to put purple against this area, and what it's going to do is it's going to allow me to have the lockers show up in front of the lockers are going to show up in front of that wall in the background, partly because of the color that I'm using. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to mix these colors together. You can leave it textured like this. You could also smooth it together. In order to get really crisp edges, you probably are going to have to smooth to an extent. And then you'll notice I can actually blow the dust away and I can actually see a little bit more of what's going on. Now if I look at this wall right here is actually darker than the floor that's next to it. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to put even more of this purple in here. And then technically, I'm also going to add a little bit of black to this back wall. One other thing that you need to be aware of is that even though you are using the pastels, you may have to go back into different parts of the drawing, just like what we did with the cylinder and box assignment. And I do actually want to get a little bit of the pink and a little bit of the purple into this side of the wall. And again, I'm not trying to use, like, I'm not trying to draw a tiny line, so I'm going to make sure that I get in here and that I actually like blend these colors together a little bit more. And I want a little bit of purple in there. What I'm doing too, if you actually look at my fingers, as you can see, there's different colors on different fingers. I need to be careful of that as I'm going into different areas, because you can actually see if I press too hard, I'm leaving fingerprints in different areas. So again, I'm going to add a little bit of this purple into these areas, and I'm just going to use my fingers to actually rub that together, and eventually I do have to blow the chalk away. And again, like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to put a little bit of black into this area on the side, because technically it's going to create even more contrast up against these lockers once I start putting the other values in there. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to add this black. It's actually mixing with the purple and turning a tiny bit gray. And I want to make sure again that I have a more like natural or varied thickness. So it's really thin here and it's gradually getting thicker, and then on the top I'm thinning it out again so that it doesn't look like I took a marker and I make just one area all the same thickness, because that would not be how the picture looks naturally. So as I get that in there, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take a break and I'm going to wash my hands really quickly, so that when I start working on the floor and the walls, I'm not getting all of these colors that I had here onto the walls. Another thing that I can do if I'm really bothered by the fact that this isn't nice and crisp is I could actually go and take an eraser and I can erase parts of where this pastel is that are really bothering me. You really do want to be careful not to accidentally like smear what you're working on there. And I can also see in my video here as I'm talking to you that it's way too dark in some of these areas. It actually looks more natural in real life. The camera is actually putting a little bit too much light in there, but I'll probably go back and make that look a little bit nicer in a moment. As I'm looking at my photographic reference, I can actually see that this floor is much lighter than the wall. So I'm going to start with this medium pink, and then I'm probably, again, going to use some of the white, because I can see that there's light coming in from the hallway over here on this other side. And again, Nick, you can see where I'm, this is chalk pastel, so it's making a lot of dust right here. And basically I'm going to have to eventually blow that away, and you can see how I'm getting a nicer edge between these two different colors. In order to get a really crisp edge, you are going to have to work at it. It's not going to just come automatically. One thing I am going to say about the reflection here, because you can see in the floor I'm actually reflecting the wall that is right above it. I do have to take a little bit of white, like I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to take some of this white and I'm going to go along the edge here to make it brighter, but the reflection should technically be darker than the wall that's above it. So I'm going to leave it a little bit darker, and I'm actually going to add a little bit more of the purple that I have, and probably even some black down into this other area over here. So you can see it's actually a little bit messy down here, but eventually I'm going to go back, and I might even be able to take a piece of paper and I can put it up next to or cover an area where I don't want something to get messed up, and I'm actually going to cover the top, and I'm going to go back in here and I'm going to erase into where the display board or that bulletin board is being reflected into the floor. and I can make this a little bit cleaner and nicer. If I want to make a really nice edge, I'm going to have to go back in here and actually use a little bit more of the black. And part of the reason, again, I'm using a little bit more black in the floor is technically, again, that reflection into the floor is darker than the object itself in real life because it's reflecting into another color, and so you're going to see something that's a little bit darker. So I'm going to be really gentle with the pressure that I'm using with my finger, and I'm actually going in here and I'm making that a little bit darker. And then I'm going to blow away stuff that I don't want. If I see that I have a problem seeing the dark from the light, I might want to go back in here and I might want to find with my purple, I'm going to go back in here and try to make that part a little bit lighter. And I'm using more of the area of the pastel that is like an eraser. And there you can see, I can actually now see the difference between this and that. I do have to go back and clean this area up. You can see that it's basically unfocused. Like if you took your glasses off and it would be unfocused. We want to make the drawing really look focused, so the edges between one object and another are going to have to be really, really crisp. Another thing that I can do is I'm going to come back and I'm actually going to try to take the corner of this, and I'm going to have to go kind of slow in order to fix that area where I had a little bit of an issue. I can also try to take a blending stump, and the blending stump will actually probably help me. Oops, and I went a little bit too dark because I had a little bit of dark on the finger that I tried to use to blend that. So I'm going to have to go back in here and I'm going to have to add a little bit more pink, and I might even have to add a little bit of white back on top in order to make that wall look a little bit brighter than what it was before. So hopefully you can tell, like oops, I did it again. Oops, I did it again. So technically, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to use another finger rub, make this part lighter. And you can see sometimes I'm having a difficult time here getting that edge really nice. One other thing that I would suggest is you can see I've got some pastel pencils here that are similar colors as to what I was using. And if you actually go in with the pastel pencils, you'll be able to get those edges that we had talked about in order to refine different parts of your drawing. They are harder than the regular pastels though, so you're going to have to be very careful to not lose the blending that you have, and you have to just like be gentle with how much pressure you're putting on different things. But there you can see I'm actually starting to get a nicer edge, and I can tell here again it's like not quite looking focused enough. So I'm going to take my pastel pencil and go in here on the reflection part, or the floor value, and I'm going to put a little bit more in there, and that actually helped quite a bit. Then I'm going to go back in with my white, and I'm going to take a little bit of white in here on the floor in order to make that reflection more the value that I want it. So you can tell in just a few minutes I got like almost a half of my drawing at least covered. I am going to have to go back in and refine some areas where I can see like I've got too much of pink right here. I'm going to have to like trail that out and put a little bit more purple in. Up here I have a little bit too much purple. I need to put a little bit of pink, and I'm probably going to need to again trail it out or make it like a really thin area that goes from thin to thick, sort of like what's happening with the black. And actually the black area in here, I could use a little bit more black into this area over here. You're going to need to keep assessing your drawing in order to make it look the way that you really would like, to have enough contrast to be able to see different areas, and in order to get that really high score that I'm sure you want.